Now, in the gallery this afternoon, we have 6 teachers and education officials from schools in Curacao. Curacao is an island in the Caribbean, which is part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and they're visiting Jersey as part of an Erasmus exchange programme aiming to explore how schools within a multilingual island context approach education. And whilst here in a fellow island community, they're keen to learn about Jersey's education system, about the ways in which linguistic and cultural diversity is celebrated within schools, and how inclusive classroom practices are promoted. They're going to visit a number of primary schools and secondary schools during their stay, and I invite members to welcome them in the usual way. They're also here to witness our debate on commercial property leases. Come all this way. Thank you very much.
So, before we start off, could I ask the Leave of the Assembly to withdraw the amendment of the Comité de Connétable P68 amendment? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The amendment is withdrawn. So we continue the debate on the Minister's amendment, which has been seconded, and Connétable of St John.
Thank you, sir. So I'm pleased that my committee colleagues have withdrawn the amendment to the amendment. So we absolutely need to collaborate to get the best results. So in his speech just before lunch, the Minister mentioned St John. And just over 4 years ago, so coming out of COVID, we had 2 empty shops and a third seriously thinking of pulling out. That would have given us only a 66% occupancy. So I'm proud to say that our precinct is now vibrant with people coming regularly from all over the island. Our challenge is parking, but what a challenge to have. Marketing is key, sir. We've worked with local businesses, encouraging them to use social media and traditional, such as parish magazines. And if members haven't seen the local butcher's Christmas messaging, I highly recommend it. But be quick. It's humorous, but it's innovative, and it's having very good results. So our traffic calming measures has allowed people who would have previously driven short distances to now walk or cycle, creating spaces for those who come from further afield. So in Halkett Street, that is a great success story where the government has worked with the parish. The work in Newcut has seen 5 new alfresco applications that will bring the area to life next spring and summer. The investment in Broad Street, sir, will further enhance St Helier, and that investment, sir, supports both the retail and the visitor strategies. But we need to do more. We need as many levers as possible. Regulation needs to be appropriate and proportionate. And so, as a former chair of Jersey Business, I'm fully aware of the value that they offer and the further potential they have working in the retail sector and other sectors, sir. They could be driving force behind modernising leases, for example, and encouraging people who are considering going into business to work with them and get advice. So the Constable of St Heliers led on the work in the markets, and it's great to see businesses there now looking for larger premises in the high street, sir. That's a good example of collaboration. So I'm happy to support the proposition as amended. Thank you.
Thank you, Connétable. Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. And could I just confirm if we are debating the amendment or the proposition currently?
The amendment.
The amendment. Okay, thank you. So I did rise to speak briefly on the amendment, which I know Deputy Miles has indicated her wish it's accepted, and I will absolutely vote with the amendment to see it read then finally as amended. However, given the procedural process has led to this being debated separately, it may be helpful for the Minister in his what may be brief summing up to explain a little more about Part C, the amendments he brings to Part C and how he foresees this work taking place. To remind members, Part C is to change the terms of the remit with regards to a register of commercial property. The comments alongside, or the report alongside the amendment highlight Part C is to now move to use the Jersey Land and Property Index, the JLPI, as a source of information to better understand some of the commercial, I won't say market, but the commercial assets throughout the island. It highlights in the report that it maintains a list of all properties, those that are commercial, and there are further subdivisions. However, the report says this data does not include a definitive list of vacant units, and that this assessment would see offices undertake an assessment of all retail properties to identify specific areas of high vacancy and use this as part of the policy work the amendment seeks to deliver on. My quick questions to the Minister would be, how does he foresee the use of the JLPI data specifically to assess that? Did offices advise whether it's feasible to understand any meaningful assessment of the retail property, I won't say again market, but the estate of property for retail? And the second part is wider, is it in his view that this piece of work is to feed his department's kind of evidence base to the Minister for Environment with regards to planning policy? Clearly a large part of this, and I think the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development has highlighted his challenges about the economy's remit and input into former island plan work. In particular, light industrial is an area I think has been highlighted by many members. And I note that the amendment to Part C inserts a particular focus to retail and acute retail vacancy, but it may also be very interesting if the work can extend to understanding where there are pinch points or lack of vacancy or kind of a tightness in the market. And I know that concerns have been raised about the provision of light industrial. So it is merely for the Minister perhaps to put on record, as he sums up on this, his assessment as to how this work will undertake, how he and his officers will communicate the shortcomings that this data will inevitably have, but the logistics and the financial implications explain that. And lastly, how he sees a stream of work perhaps in parallel feeding into the policy work, not just of the retail roadmap, but that of planning policy, knowing the Minister for Environment is keen that work is ongoing in that area. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? David Taddeo.
So I'm wondering why we're debating this separately if effectively it's been accepted, and I'm wondering if it's because of the amendment that was going to be put by the Committee de Connotables, which has now been withdrawn. So we are in a position nonetheless of being asked to opine on whether or not the amended version is better than the original version. And so we do have a vote on it, and we will vote on it. And I would like to ask, I suppose, the Assembly and the mover of the proposition, notwithstanding the fact that she's accepting the amendment, to know whether or not we would have been better off sticking with her original wording. Because it seems to me that often in this kind of scenario, the acceptance of the amendments is some kind of compromise. It hopefully still does what Deputy Miles wishes it to do, but I can't help feeling that there's a lot more wiggle room, a lot less certainty, especially in terms of timings and of exactly what is being asked for. And I'm looking at the two, I still prefer the original wording of Deputy Miles, but I'm also mindful of the fact that she may wish to speak to this and explain what it is that she's willing to accept, why, and whether or not she believes that it doesn't necessarily water it down excessively, and why she can stomach it, if that's okay.
Thank you, Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. And I thank the previous speaker for that direction. As I say, I had intended to address this as one speech, so this is the second part of what I perhaps would have said the first time round. We've had some constructive engagement and discussion and with the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development, so I've been able to agree the set of amendments that I feel refine the approach. They make the proposals more deliverable, but I still think they do retain the core purpose of my original proposition, which is to tackle long-term commercial vacancy, improve fairness in leasing, and enhance transparency across the sector. So it was on those grounds that I was content to accept all of these amendments, but on the understanding that it is a first step. I do need to thank the Minister for the Economy and all his officers for their very collaborative way in which they've approached this matter. He recognised that this hasn't been a political context, but a shared effort to find some long-needed practical ways to strengthen Jersey's retail and commercial landscape. And I think the amendments that were proposed really demonstrate that shared intent. I think they balance my ambition with what's practical and ensure that any measures that we take are proportionate, achievable, and also aligned with our position as a place that welcomes enterprise and investment. And also in terms of the open-ended nature of dropping the March and agreeing to the end of 2026, just to be really practical. In terms of Part A, tackling the empty commercial properties, I'm pleased that the amendment acknowledges the importance of tackling those, but it also recognises that not all vacancies are bad or abnormal. It's a normal part of business. Short periods of inactivity due to refurbishment or renegotiation, of course, are a normal part of commercial turnover, but that isn't actually what we're talking about here. We're talking about long-term vacancies of properties that are effectively unlettable. And I've said, you know, it's not about being heavy-handed, it's about finding a way of being very proactive. I also like the amendments focus on encouraging meanwhile use, you know, stuff to be temporary, creative, community focused. It's a particular problem up at St Brellard's where landlords, you know, have refused pop-ups, they've refused temporary use. So I'm looking forward to the collaboration with the Minister's team about how we might move that forward. And that intention to replicate the partnership model, not just in St Brelard, but other parishes. The proposition as amended takes a very pragmatic and proportionate approach to supporting commercial tenants and fair practice. It's about gathering and analysing the information that's available and producing best practice guidance and a standard lease template for use by landlords and tenants alike. At this point, it's not about legislation, it's not about aiming to introduce a commercial law, it's about trying to assess what the problems are and what might be done about it to everybody's benefit. I consider this to be an important step in the right direction. It provides immediate practical benefits for small businesses, helping them to avoid some arrangements which are frankly quite exploitative, and also laying the groundwork for a more informed policy in the future. I'm really encouraged that Jersey Business will lead this work, engaging directly with the landlords, owners, tenants, and also legal experts to develop a set of resources that reflect our specific commercial environment. And again, to reiterate what the Minister said, I think this kind of partnership between government, industry, business and the parishes is exactly the constructive approach that we should be taking to tackle tricky challenges rather than just sort of acting in isolation. So in respect of C, and alluding to Deputy Curtis's point and Deputy Tadia's point, this amendment recognises that much of the data already exists through the Jersey Land and Property Index, and that it would be more efficient to build upon those existing systems rather than creating a new and costly register from scratch. And we see from the Minister's report that it certainly would be expensive. The decision to conduct a targeted assessment of retail vacancies is sensible and proportionate compromise, which I'm happy to agree. It does achieve the same end, better information to guide policy and support revitalisation without significant financial and administrative burden that a wholly new register would entail. And I think this approach respects both the public interest in transparency but also the practical realities of such a register. So in conclusion, I think what this amended proposition achieves is a workable roadmap for change, and that's why I have accepted the amendments. It reflects the concerns raised in my proposition, but in a way that government consider to be deliverable and balanced and manageable. Preserves the key principles that motivated me to bring this forward, as I said at the beginning, tackling long-term commercial vacancy, supporting particularly small businesses with fair leasing practices, and enhancing transparency in how commercial properties are managed and maintained. And I hope they do so in a way that builds consensus across the Assembly. So again, in accepting these amendments, I do need to emphasise that I don't see this as the end of the conversation. It's the beginning of a more coordinated effort to improve the way Jersey's commercial spaces are used and maintained. And I think the success of this work will depend on continued collaboration between departments, parishes, landlords, and all of those who really do care about keeping our retail areas lively and sustainable. I was really disappointed to see the Comité de Connétable amendment come in yesterday afternoon. I did have quite a long speech prepared about why that wouldn't be a good idea. At the end of the day, the Connétable are the heart of our parish. We couldn't possibly do this without. And actually, the very first thing I said to the Minister when we discussed this, when he said about putting the Comité de Connétable in, was I should have put that in at the beginning. So I was very pleased to see that go in. As I say, I'm grateful to the Minister for working constructively with me, and I believe that the amended proposition represents a strong and very practical foundation for progress. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank my fellow Deputy St Brillard for bringing this proposition, but also for being amenable to the amendment that's been brought by the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. I agree with her that the amendments are that they go a lot more in the direction of supporting the small businesses that have had difficulties in that area. Combined, I think that what's quite important, and we have to be realistic, it is a private site, it's not a government-run community centre, but it opens up, I think, a greater understanding of what the issues are, why it's not so straightforward as to say, right, let's do this to the landlord or let's do this to the rates. It's actually investigating what's been found in different areas and different jurisdictions, what has worked, what hasn't worked, but more importantly, just not rushing into things and risking unforeseen consequences. So the original amendment did give me a little bit, the original proposition gave me some concern because it seemed to be immediately going into the area of the fiscal. There should need to be something done fiscally, and it's something that I have myself sometimes contemplated in the area of hotels and the change of the land use. There is some more work, I suspect, to be done in the planning area too. But this, I think, is great, looking at these first steps that need to be done to support small businesses, but also to identify the extent to which the numbers work and are sustainable in that area too. So I do urge members to support this amendment and the amended proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? I call upon the Minister to reply. Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I'd like to thank everyone who's spoken. I'd particularly like to thank the Comité de Connétable for withdrawing their amendment. I'm really grateful because I think we can work well on this together, and as I was saying, it's very much my department will be doing the heavy lifting, but we will need to speak to the Comité from time to time to understand and to get the Comité's views on things, which I'll be really keen to do. I won't speak for too long. I think Deputy Miles has, in many ways, stolen the speech I would have made. But what I want to say is, and this is very much to Deputy Scott's point, is that this is a learning exercise. I think when it comes to commercial premises in Jersey, we don't know very much about them. We don't even know necessarily where they all are. And this proposition, as amended, will give us the ability to actually start to learn about that. And I think to Deputy Curtis's, Alex Curtis's perspective, is that this work will help us inform Island Plan. The Island Plan in the next Assembly. It will also help us inform a wide variety of other policies and laws and pieces of work as we go through, because precisely we will have information that we previously did not have. So there are really two parts to Deputy Miles's proposition and my amendment. The first part is very much focused on the idea of empty vacancies, empty properties, particularly in retail areas. And that is something that is difficult to manage. At the end of the day, commercial leases are private contracts between two parties, but when those contracts lead to a situation where there's either vacancies or properties becoming run down or looking run down, those private arrangements can have huge impacts on the public realm and the public psychology as well. And so I think it is important that we begin to understand what we do where there are vacancies or areas of a high street or areas of a shopping and retail area which have a large amount of vacancies. What can we do to encourage the owners of those properties to put them into some sort of use, even if it is only temporary? That will make a big difference to the public feeling about the island. In the lunch break, I had the pleasure of talking to one of my constituency colleagues, Deputy Howes, and she was quite right in expressing her concern about engaging in commercial leases, kind of meddling, for want of a better word. My word, not Deputy Howes. And I think it was a very good point, because it's the sort of point I was raising during the residential tenancy law debate. And I think one of the important things about this amended version of Deputy Miles's proposition is it takes us away from that legal realm. We are not going to be meddling with commercial leases. What we will be doing is seeking to understand how the majority of commercial leases work in Jersey. And once we have that understanding, we'll then be in a better position to be able to help particularly new entrepreneurs, and Jersey business will be able to help particularly new entrepreneurs ensure that they know what they're getting themselves into and how they can best protect themselves when engaging into a commercial lease for the first time. Because they really can be, and I know this from my own experience, they can be very different beasts compared to private residential property leases. And so I think learning about that and Jersey business having a better armoury with which to guide entrepreneurs in Jersey will be incredibly helpful. And part C I've already spoken to, which is the Land and Property Index, using that and that piece of effectively just research work so that we can understand where commercial property and particularly retail property in Jersey are mostly sited. And that sounds silly because obviously people say, well, King Street's where most of the retail property is in Jersey. That's correct. But there are many pockets of it around the island which often spring up without people even particularly knowing about them, because we've seen obviously areas where farm shops, which once upon a time used to be farms, but have now become quite vibrant retail areas as well. And so having that understanding, I think, will be hugely helpful for future policy making. So, sir, with that brief summary, I'd like to propose the amendment. Well, it's not propose the amendment, but move the amendment for a vote, please, sir.
Vote has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Announce that the amendment has been adopted nearly unanimously. 43 votes for and 1 abstention.
One, please, sir.
The Conotab of St Clement abstained.
We'll now move back to the proposition as amended. Does anyone wish to speak on the proposition as amended? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. Sorry. Pop the mic on, it's always helpful. I really just want to talk about various things, because I think the Minister alluded to this idea of, governments coming in and so telling everybody what to do in a market economy. And I recognise that the Minister has basically said, I'm very sensitive to this and to this point. And I just want to come back to this point of what is the purpose of government. And one of the purposes of government is to facilitate. And I think it's really important that we remember that fact. My question always is why are these properties empty? This is, Jersey's got lots of, real estate is very valuable in Jersey. So it just makes absolutely no sense for properties to remain empty and having no return. So the question is why? Why have we got this problem? And so the next thing I turn to is and then this is about the research in the marketplace is, do we actually have too much retail space? Do we know what the size or scale of retail should look like in Jersey in some ways? Is anybody measuring that in some way, shape or form? And then that begs the next question after that, and that is about change of use. One of the things I know is really challenging in Jersey is getting change of use done, and cheaply. So I come back to being a facilitating government, and that is, how does government make it easy for businesses to achieve change of use? In other words, if the Kennebec precinct is full of potential shops, how do we change that into something else? How do we help businesses? How do we help landlords turn those things, those areas into something different? How do we encourage that? And I think that's really, really important. The other thing is about location. Historically, the Kennebec precinct or certain retail areas were where retail was done. Is that still the case? Are we still putting retail in the right places in today's market? And how are we accommodating that? That brings you into the Bridging Island plan and the plan of where we do stuff these days. So what I'm trying to probably get to is ultimately it's a very dynamic market, a very dynamic place. So have we got in place the governance, the rules, the laws, the flexibility to accommodate that dynamism? And I think we don't have. And I think we need to be really looking at ourselves in a changing world which has gone online. So much more is how are we facilitating as a government, how is government facilitating those areas? We're looking at al fresco, and I know the Constable of St Helier is very super keen on al fresco, but it's one thing to have al fresco, it's another thing to say, well, how much are you charging for it? How much is, are you enabling businesses? Are you encouraging them to? You may want a policy of al fresco, but are you helping businesses to establish that? The other thing around change of use, and I come back to something which is happening at this moment in time, is around actually a gym from the Fort Regent, which is moving or attempting to move out, because obviously Fort Regent is closed, into a warehouse facility in the middle of town. It's the cost of that move. It's the cost of the planning. And I know this is the Minister has a policy, there's a certain charge out rate for planning applications, etc., etc. But how are we facilitating people to encourage them to do this, to do what we want them to do? Where's that carrot to get that behaviour change that we all look for? So those are sort of my main points I want to make. Discourage, commercial, the places being empty. Absolutely get that. But, I come back to facilitation. The structure of commercial leases. Yes, I understand that. But again, there are good reasons as to why leases are structured in such a way. Digital register, absolutely get behind that. I think it's really important we start to understand who owns what in a small island of this size. But I come back to just remember what government's all about. Government's about facilitating, and we should be thinking about making the rules. I say making the rules, don't want to make too many rules. We should be thinking about how does government, to some degree, step away, but also how does government turn the rules of the island to operate in a much more commercially sensitive way. So that's my take on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Breniff.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I want to join others in thanking Deputy Miles for bringing the proposition and the Minister for his positive engagement. I think it's led to a good balance in consideration of the issues. But I want to highlight a couple of points in addition to those that I think that have already been made by other speakers. The Minister and others, I think, have spoken about the relative good position in which Jersey finds itself, particularly in relation to commercial property and vibrancy of the high street and so on. And I very much agree. I think that for all that you sometimes hear about St Helier is in decline, it is in a far, far better state than many towns of similar or even much greater size in the UK. And as the Minister for Infrastructure has said, there are also many good improvements going on. And by way of comparison, only last week I paid a brief visit to a significant northern town, let's call it that. And really the sense of decline was transmitted very strongly through the boarded up shops and the poor physical state of many others that were still open. So we do not even want to start heading down that route. And I think part of my thinking about this proposition is that in a sense, if we're not careful, what is happening at Lekeneve could, if we're not vigilant, be the thin end of a wedge. And this amended proposition gives us the chance to get ahead of the curve. We're being vigilant, and I think that's really important. There's one other point I wanted to make on this question of intervention. And some businesses I know, particularly property businesses, may not want any intervention that may result from this review. But there will be other businesses that would welcome greater intervention to ensure a well-functioning market in in commercial property. But that is why I think it is right that it's the Minister's Department and Jersey Business that lead this work. The Minister needs to see those issues up close and personal and make his judgment accordingly. I know he errs against intervention, but I do hope that in the spirit of the proposition, he also errs on the side of the wider community interest, which is surely on the side also of ensuring the maximum usage of existing commercial property on terms which are not onerous to tenants. And that might involve some forms of intervention, not necessarily legislation, but I think it's important. I do want to put on record that I think we should be considering all the options in this situation, because if we are to safeguard the vitality of the retail and other commercial sectors of the economy, we must ensure that we are acting in the greater community interest rather than the narrow sectional interest of one particular part of the community. But I think, having said that, I think that the proposition as amended strikes that balance very well, and I hope that the Minister is able to pursue this work speedily, and I look forward very much to seeing the result of it. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Taddeo.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I'm going to start with paragraph B initially, because I think that a lot of the debate up until now has focused on the empty commercial properties, but I think, and I don't think, not saying that's not important, but I'll consider that in the second part of what I'm about to say. But for me, I think one of the underappreciated and bigger problems, if you like, immediately, and I know that both Deputy Miles and I have had conversations separately, perhaps with one former tenant of the smaller Lekeneve precinct, which was really focusing on all of their issues came from the condition of the property in which they were supposed to operate, to the point where it was such poor quality that you wouldn't even keep a dog in it, which was unfortunate because their business was around dogs and they needed to operate dogs from that property and that premises. And it got to the point of us having to, having to think about, and I think this is partly what informed Deputy Miles's proposition, although there will have been no doubt many other examples, and also not in St Brelard, about what is the minimum expectation that one can have between that, again, asymmetrical relationship often between the commercial tenant and the property owner. And of course, you may be renting not directly off the property owner, but through an agency. And often it's fair enough to say that this is a private commercial venture that you're entering into with your eyes open, but the Minister, I think, did talk about maybe more unsophisticated or uninitiated, I think was the word he used, business people, or indeed one could be in a situation where one is having to renew a tenancy or indeed look for new premises because the lease has not been renewed. So there could be all sorts of scenarios where somebody's livelihood relies on them needing to continue a business and they don't have the wherewithal to make certain demands about what should be or shouldn't be in a particular tenancy agreement. So I do welcome that. I do have some questions, though, about how and what will constitute best practice, because the Minister talks about this amendment, which has been amended, would seek to collate what information is available and to set and to publish a set of best practice guides. So guidelines, I think, for both landlords and prospective tenants, and this enhanced transparency would help prospective tenants to identify poor commercial practices and to avoid punitive leases. So the problem with that is that I think, first of all, in Jersey, what does good look like, let alone what does best look like? I think there isn't a blueprint as to what good looks like, and I think it's going to be necessary for Jersey business to effectively come up with a voluntary code. That's what we're talking about here, a voluntary code, a voluntary set of guidelines. And it's not just good practice, we're talking about best practice here. And if I go down to the financial and manpower implications, which hasn't been talked about yet, we are told from the Minister that parts A and B of the proposition as amended could be delivered using resources from within the Department for the Economy. Nevertheless, this would necessitate a reprioritisation of the department's work as officers are required to cease delivering on other projects. Those are not inconsequential words. So the first point is that it's saying that this could be delivered from within existing resources. So I ask the Minister, will this be delivered from within existing resources? And what are the reprioritisations that his department will have to do and officers will have to do or cease delivering on in order to deliver this? So that's something which the Minister's put in writing. I'd like to have more information, partly with my scrutiny hat on, to understand what other pieces of work might be ceasing or not going ahead because of this. And I think it's perhaps unfortunate that that's crept in here, as if to say, well, we may not be able to do other things and make it an either-or, sir. Turning to the question now of empty properties, I do have to say that, of course, I've got an element of déjà vu here because I did bring a proposition myself, not for commercial premises, but it was numbered P48 2002, and my wording is fairly similar, asking for things to be done in terms of domestic properties, that an effective mechanism should be introduced to discourage domestic properties from being left vacant for long periods. I can see Deputy War stamping his feet there, but I'm told that he's not without blame in this. We've got both the current and former ministers stamping their feet, perhaps for different reasons, and I'm not necessarily going to stamp my feet at either of them, but simply ask about, I don't really care who's in power, but I would like to know why that promise has not been, at least that why that state's decision has not been delivered on. And I'm told that maybe on the one hand, the budget that was with the former minister may have been squandered, but I still do look to my own party leader who is currently in the job and say, you do have, the minister does have a number of months left in post, and I will certainly be at least tabling one more question on that issue to make sure that we can at least do something before the next election. So I say that just as a salutary reminder, I suppose, to Deputy Miles to say, I think this is absolutely great what she's doing here in accepting an amendment from the Minister, but do keep the Minister's feet to the fire on this to make sure that something productive is done. Deputy War, I think, is quite correct when he speaks about the commercial landscape of shops being quite complex and quite difficult. There is no logical reason to leave shops empty, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. There's no logical reason to leave an empty domestic property, a potential home, as Deputy War would call it, vacant when you could be putting somebody in there productively and getting some financial return from it. But nonetheless, it does happen. So we know that the market in itself can't always be trusted to produce logical results, and that's why it does need some steering in certain occasions, even if it's not fully blown state intervention. What I would say, though, is that if we look at the particular example of Lekeneve shops, they were commenced bang on 1960. So we're looking at a very old, anyone who was born in 1960 would be, by my calculation, about 65 today. And if they were, is that right? Why do people shake their heads? I get worried about my maths ability. It is 65, and of course, if you were 20 when those shops were going up, you'd be about 85 now. So there have been lots of changes that have happened. And I think one has to appreciate that we have much more choice about how we do our shopping nowadays. There are lots of things that you don't even need to leave the house for to buy. We all know what I'm talking about. And so, of course, the share of the marketplace in the island, and including at the Kennervay precinct, is necessarily going to be a much different beast commercially to what it was 65 years ago. So perhaps we should be expecting more empty shops, and we might need to be thinking about actually whether all of those shop spaces need to be perhaps converted to other uses on a more consistent basis. Otherwise, we will see this perhaps musical chairs going on about certain shops undertakings going out of business and others not being viable unless they're big multinationals and big brands that come in. If I can put on record, I think there was an element of mixed emotion about the new card factory that took the place of what was, I think, at one point a former Burger King, and then most recently was a Bookies in the corner of Le Canapé Parade. I'm a bit more relaxed about that. I think we're not in a position to be picking and choosing who we have taking over the rentals up there. I think we should, in a sense, be grateful that somebody is willing to take it on, and I know that that particular outlet will have no shortage of business, especially in a cost of living crisis. But I do understand that, of course, you can never keep everybody happy. So in saying that, I do wish, as a St Brelard colleague, Deputy Miles, all the best with this, and I hope that many of us will still be around in a year or two's time to hold whichever minister's feet to the fire, and so that we do see less empty commercial properties in Jersey, that we do see better relationships between, hopefully, the small number of suspect tenancies that we see, and that we do see a thriving St Helier or thriving centres of commerce in the island provinces, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Morrell.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I stand only to address the questions that Deputy Tadier asked. He asked, what does it mean, or words to that effect, about the business as usual aspect of the department's work. What this means is we're not seeking extra money. There's nothing in the budget for this. There won't be anything in the budget next year for this piece of work. We are doing it within our existing departmental resources. And as far as reprioritisation is concerned, I have to say we haven't had that discussion. We haven't had that in-depth discussion. I have had a brief discussion and did point to the period of Purdah as potentially a good time for officers to do a large part of this work when priorities are such on hold, because we'll be between ministers and so priorities can change. And so that's the extent of the conversation I've had so far. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Anyone else? Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir, and I'd like to thank all members for their contribution, and I will be brief because I think a lot of what I wanted to say has already been said. I think Deputy Wall raises a very good question. Why are all these empty units around? Certainly up at Kennervay Precinct and Parade, it must be costing the owners an absolute fortune with 9 empty units. And one of the drivers for this proposition is to do that piece of work and actually understand what it is about commercial properties that can be let go when all that potential revenue is being lost. I hope the Minister will take on board his ideas about change of use and feed them into the mix with his team. The word that Deputy Wall used was facilitate. And I think it is facilitation, particularly at Kennervay Precinct and Parade, that we do need. But I think that needs to come from government. Deputy Reniff referred to vigilance, and vigilance as being important. It's because we've taken our eye off the ball up there over very many years that we've ended up with the condition that we've got. And I think I agree with his views about sometimes intervention is required, and sometimes actually sharp penalties are required, and that's why there will be an exploration of the fiscal mechanisms. We talk about a carrot and stick approach. I think sometimes you need to sharpen your carrot. In terms of what Deputy Tanier said, my understanding of what is going to be produced based on the discussions that I've had with the Minister and his team is something akin to the Good Landlord Charter that is widely available in the UK. And again, it starts with a code of practice, it starts with voluntary arrangements, and it will be for future assemblies to make the assessment of whether those voluntary arrangements work or not. Actually, very few countries have legislated for this type of thing. Certainly some states in Australia have legislated for empty commercial properties, but it's by no means common. So it would suggest that voluntary arrangements and charters actually are affected. Deputy Tadier also talks about the type of shopping. And yes, of course, retail has changed. But certainly out west, there are things that, you can't do online. You can't get your hair cut online. You can't get your dog groomed online. You can't taste wine. You can't eat. You can't play. You can't craft online. And those small units that are dotted not just out west, but all around the island are actually offer tremendous potential. And that's not just about retail, that's also about asset-based community development, using those spaces to actually combat social isolation, to actually bring, vulnerable members of the parish together. For the record, I take a slightly different view to the new shop that has moved into Lekeneve precinct. I think it is a problem when you have a national chain open in direct competition with what is a very small business. And I think it is a shame that government have not been, or somebody hasn't been able to facilitate, to use Deputy Wall's words, actually the opening of a different type of shop up there so that we would have a variety, because actually we have 5 retail units up there that all offer the same offer, and I would not be surprised in the slightest if one of those small businesses does not survive, and I consider that to be quite sad. So again, I've said this proposition's not about punishing property owners, it's about empowering communities, recognising that empty properties just drain the vitality from our communities, and particularly our parishes. It's about understanding that fair, transparent lease arrangement should give our small businesses the security they need to thrive and invest and promote entrepreneurship. And it is about realising what we already know, that we know that good data used wisely enables much smarter policy and more effective focused investment. So as the retail roadmap says, when retail spaces are active, everybody benefits. They create jobs, they create tax revenue, they foster local pride and community spirit, and they signal to residents and visitors alike that actually Jersey is open for business. Yes, I have compromised on this proposition. I think Deputy Tadier was quite polite in the way that he described it. My young colleague to my right over there, Deputy Curtis, refers to this proposition as a Bon Jovi. We are halfway there. And the next line, sir, is, of course, we're living on a prayer. And on that optimistic note, I call for the appel. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. Proposition has been adopted, 38 votes for, no vote contra, and 1 abstention.
The Conotab of St Clement again.
The next item is the draft competition amendment law lodged by the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. The main respondent is the chair of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Competition Jersey Amendment Law 2000, a law to amend the Competition Jersey Law 2005. The States, subject to the sanction of His Most Excellent Majesty and Council, have adopted the following law.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Today, sir, I am asking members to adopt the Draft Competition Jersey Amendment Law. This draft law proposes a number of important changes to our competition regime as set out in the Competition Jersey Law 2005. Before we discuss the principles of this draft law, I'd like to thank the members and officers of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel for their work in reviewing this legislation, draft legislation, and for their comments, which are available online for members to read. If we look at the draft law, it is, first of all, worth setting out the purposes of promoting competition in Jersey's economy. Why do we do this? Well, put very simply, with competition, businesses must work hard to win and keep customers. As a result, competition bears down on prices and drives up quality and choice. As I am sure members will agree, it is key that Jersey has a competition regime that is tailored to the size of our jurisdiction and takes account of the unique characteristics of the island's economy. To use the words of the prominent Oxford economist Sir John Vickers, in small island economies such as Jersey, it is just as important that markets work well as it is in larger economies. However, in smaller economies, competition policy faces particular challenges. First of all, some of our local markets are not as exposed to international competition, or are not exposed to international competition, which means that there is not as much scope as in larger economies for there to be effective competition. Secondly, there are economies of scale in competition policy itself, so its cost per resident in Jersey is greater than that in larger economies. Thirdly, given Jersey's size and geographic location, high barriers to entry often characterise our markets. All these aspects underline the importance of ensuring that our competition policy is tailored to the needs of our island. This assembly demonstrated the importance it places on well-functioning local markets by establishing the Jersey Competition and Regulatory Authority in 2001, initially as an independent regulator for the telecommunications and postal services sectors, and in 2005 as a generic competition authority. In recent years, my department has conducted what is, in essence, the first wholesale review of Jersey's competition rules since their inception 20 years ago. This work has culminated in the draft law, which is before members today. This review and the draft law are timely and important as they are intended to help ensure that residents and businesses in Jersey can get the best out of their economy from competition working as well as it practically can. As members will know, if a market is perfectly competitive, no single business would have the ability to set prices. Rather, each seller would have to accept the price decided by the market, as charging a higher price would result in loss of market share to its competitors. In the opposite situation, however, with a monopoly, there is only one seller, who therefore has significant power to set prices at the level that is most beneficial to them. In the absence of any form of regulation in a monopoly, prices could potentially be much higher than the price that would be set in a competitive market. This, again, underlines the importance of a well-designed and effectively enforced competition law. Looking at it more practically, in between the extremes of perfect competition and monopoly, any move to more competition in our island will, all else being equal, force businesses to keep prices low and ensure that consumers benefit from the best deals, cheapest prices, and most efficient service. However, as I've already outlined in my opening remarks, as a small island economy, we face particular challenges in ensuring sufficient competition. There is a trade-off, in that a small domestic market means there is a limit to the number of market competitors that can operate, which raises questions about the choice of market monitoring regime. In particular, when should we rely on economic regulation instead of competition law to address specific market issues? Whilst this is a question which is outside of the scope of today's debate, I'm acutely aware of this challenge and will ensure that the mechanisms for market oversight are kept under constant review. Furthermore, the Oxera review that I referenced earlier also emphasised the need for a culture of competition in Jersey to enable competition law to work effectively. This places particular importance on activities designed to promote a competitive environment and raise awareness of competition policy and its benefits among local businesses, consumers and public institutions. In addition, as members know, the government has taken various steps in recent years to minimise the impact of the cost of living challenges, which impact us all, but particularly those islanders who are already struggling the most. Whilst the high levels of inflation seen in recent years have to an extent been caused by external factors, effective competition overseen by an independent regulator ensures that prices do not rise beyond what can be reasonably expected. In turn, this helps to ensure that consumers and businesses are not faced by what could essentially be described as a double whammy of price increases. I believe that there is an important role to play for the JCRA, as fair competition and well-functioning local markets are key to minimising the impacts of these challenges. This is why I am proposing the introduction of a formal market studies framework with enhanced powers for the JCRA. As members know, a market study is an in-depth and independent study into the factors affecting competition for particular goods or services in a specific market, to find out how well competition is working and whether it could be improved. Unlike the JCRA's existing competition enforcement tools and merger investigations, market studies look at the structure, conditions and performance of the market itself, rather than asking whether there could be a breach of the law by one or many other businesses. By gathering and analysing information, the JCRA can then identify whether there are features that prevent a market from working well, and it can consider how any competition issues can best be addressed using proportionate means. As such, market studies are a flexible tool for the JCRA to seek to improve market outcomes and offer targeted pro-business, pro-consumer solutions to foster competition and establish an environment in which businesses can flourish and achieve their full potential. It is furthermore key that the JCRA is well equipped to gather the information it needs to review a specific market in Jersey. That's why the draft law includes appropriate information gathering powers for the JCRA to collect the information it needs to properly assess local markets. Today, the JCRA does not have such powers and therefore has to rely on the voluntary cooperation of businesses when conducting its market studies. However, the JCRA would normally only consider using the proposed new powers if informal approaches and information requests are impractical or have been unsuccessful. Moreover, in any event, businesses can claim confidentiality for business secrets and other confidential information that should not appear in the public report. Looking at other jurisdictions, most competition authorities have some type of power to conduct market studies, including information gathering powers, and usually these powers are explicitly set out in the legislative framework. In addition, given the importance of competition to innovation and improving productivity, it is key that Jersey focuses on maintaining and enhancing the competitive landscape, and the aims of this draft law are wholly aligned with the ambitions of the Future Economy Programme to ensure that the right conditions are set for sustainable economic growth for the whole economy. It is worth setting out here as well that competition and open markets tend to drive forward productivity and innovation, while market powers and closed markets tend towards the reverse, something I always fear for this island. This too is a particularly critical factor for Jersey, because raising productivity is key to maintaining living standards and prosperity in a supply-constrained economy. That's why I want to ensure that our mergers and acquisitions regime is supportive, light touch, and reduces red tape wherever possible, but also robust where it needs to be. As members may know, merger control is one of the most powerful tools available to the JCRA to regulate market power. It acts as a safeguard against the strengthening of the creation of market structures that may lead to the exercise of such power and are not justified by social gains. Merger control is especially important for small economies, such as Jersey, because in such economies, market power, once created, is very difficult to erode. Having said that, at the same time, merger control carries high costs for businesses, and the JCRA as well, some of which are increased because of Jersey's small size. As members may know, Jersey's merger control regime currently requires mandatory notification to the JCRA of all transactions that trigger certain thresholds. Whilst I am not proposing to change the mandatory notification element today, I am already working on a review to ensure that it does not unnecessarily capture transactions that do not materially impact competition in local markets. And my department will be consulting on legislative proposals next year. This is a key piece of follow-up work, as we must ensure that interactions across government and related entities are simple and efficient for businesses to enable them to grow and flourish in our island. However, if fewer transactions are notifiable under a mandatory threshold, this enhances the risk that, incidentally, a merger that may be harmful to local competition slips through the net. In Jersey, this is a particular challenge, as there are large, often financial institutions with high turnover, but whose customer base is not local, in contrast to smaller businesses with relatively low turnover, but potentially significant local market shares. Therefore, to counterbalance any changes to the merger notifications threshold to ease the cost of doing business in Jersey, the draft law includes the ability for ministers to introduce a call-in power to allow the JCRA to review certain small mergers below the threshold within a short period of time. A similar call-in has been adopted by many other countries in Europe. Any uncertainty for businesses can be taken away by offering the opportunity to get certainty in advance, for example, by voluntarily notification of JCRA of the merger. And with regard to the problem of dissecting already merged companies, this can be minimised, as I intend to set quite a short deadline before which the JCRA must indicate whether or not it wishes to review a transaction. After all, in most cases, it takes some time before businesses have actually been merged, so businesses can take this deadline into account. The JCRA will then have to decide before that deadline whether or not it wishes to call in that small merger. In that way, an equal balance is struck between the public interest of preventing market power and the business interest of legal certainty and lower regulatory costs. I would also like to bring members' attention to the proposed provisions included in the draft law to expand the range of instruments that the JCRA can use to address any competition concerns it may have identified. In particular, the draft law proposes the introduction of a so-called commitments procedure, which is intended to benefit the JCRA, the parties involved, and the public. The purpose of the proposed commitments procedure is to allow the JCRA to accept legally binding commitments from a business relating to its future conduct, where the JCRA is satisfied that these commitments address the competition concerns. Case resolution by way of commitment decisions has a number of benefits for the JCRA, the parties, and the public, which have led to the success of commitments decisions in various other jurisdictions. The absence of fines and the finding of an infringement are attractive features for businesses subject to the investigation. For the JCRA, commitment procedures enable the authority to save resources and lead to a swifter resolution of cases. Commitment decisions also allow the authority to obtain the finality of its decisions faster than infringement decisions, which are more prone to appeals by the parties. In a negotiated procedure, the JCRA may also be able to achieve commitments going beyond what the authority could otherwise obtain in an infringement procedure, including various kinds of proactive and tailor-made remedies. Market testing of the proposed commitments ensures that remedies are aligned to the reality of markets and acceptable to the business community. There are a number of other provisions which I would happily discuss, should members wish to do so or have any questions. However, for now, I'd like to conclude by emphasising again that the proposed legislative changes collectively aim to ensure that Jersey's competition framework supports business innovation and growth, exerts a downward pressure on prices, and looks after the interests of consumers. As cost of living is such a high-profile subject at the moment, these powers will be important. The proposals have been extensively consulted on and have received wide support. As I've explained, this draft law also fully aligns with the work undertaken in the Future Economy Programme and our commitment to reduce red tape, enhance opportunities for businesses, and strengthen Jersey's international reputation, as outlined in the Common Strategic Policy. In particular, competitive and well-functioning markets help create the right conditions for entrepreneurial activity and dynamic businesses to grow, which in turn improves productivity in the economy. With a more vibrant economy, this makes our island a more attractive place to live and work. I therefore hope that members will support this proposition, and I move the principles of this amendment to the law. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Are the principles seconded? Does anyone speak on the principles? Yes.
Thanks, sir. It's just to say that our scrutiny panel has looked at this, and we have had quite a long lead-in period, so it's something which in fact was started under the previous chair of the scrutiny panel, Deputy Scott, who is now of course working for the department in her assistant minister role. So we have had a long lead-in period. There's nothing in this which the panel after consideration finds particularly contentious. So we did come back to the Minister with a couple of later points, one of which was we asked a question around his powers to exempt certain entities from the JCRA scrutiny, which he could do after consultation with them. But we queried as to what that meant. Did it mean that did they have to agree that, or was it something that simply that the Minister could insist we were mindful of the fact that it could be potentially something that might flag an abusive process by any future minister, and I think we were given sufficient safeguards in understanding that process. The last one, which I still would like the Minister to address, and you can address both of these points in summing up, perhaps just to clarify for the rest of the Assembly, is that the penalty that can be imposed by the JCRA must not exceed 10% of the turnover for an undertaking during the period of the breach, up to a maximum period of 3 years. We do have a question about why turnover has been used here, because 10% of a company's turnover does seem like an arbitrary figure, in the sense that there isn't always an automatic link between a company's turnover and its income, if you like, its profit. So you could have a company which relies on a large amount of turnover to produce a small amount of profit, where the profit margins are small, or you could have a company which doesn't have as much turnover relative to its profit because it has higher profit margins. So perhaps the Minister could explain that again, and to say, is that standard in terms of a penalty, or would seem to be more relevant to make it in terms of profit, but there could be a good reason for that, which I think has partly been explained to us, but it wouldn't harm to put that again on the record. So otherwise, can I just thank the Minister and his team for the various briefings that we've had earlier on in the year, and to my panel and officers, and just wish the Minister good luck with this law, and I hope it does what he intends it to do in future.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on the principles? I call upon the Minister to reply. Minister.
Thank you, sir. Starting at the end, I think turnover is the kind of industry norm, so to speak, or the regulatory norm. Obviously, profits are something many companies make losses, and also profits and losses can be engineered to some extent. And so I think turnover is used as a much simpler and a much simpler guide, basically, engage. The safeguards around, so yes, the Deputy also asked about safeguards around the exemption powers. I know in the mergers regime at the moment, the Minister does have exemption powers in the same, similarly, but if a merger were happening today and as Minister I wanted to exempt it, I would have to go and consult with the JCRA today, so I don't think there's any change from the existing situation. But should the JCRA have a particular concern and wish that the Minister didn't exempt something, I think that would be something that would come out very quickly. And so I don't think any Minister would jump to act just purely, quickly against the JCRA's own views. So I think, and we have to go with the JCRA safeguards on that. Thank you, sir.
Is it poll called for? Yes, call. 4 members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. To announce that the principles have been adopted unanimously, 42 votes for. Minister, how do you wish to propose the articles?
I'd like to propose them en bloc, please, sir.
Are the articles seconded? Does any motion speak on the articles? Those in favour of adopting the articles kindly show. Thank you. Those against, the articles are adopted in second reading. Minister, do you propose the articles as adopted in third reading?
Yes, please, sir.
Is the matter seconded? Does anyone wish to speak on the articles as adopted in third reading? Minister, I'm not sure you can speak on the third reading because you've opposed them. You've missed your chance.
I think I was preempting you, sir.
Yes. Those in favour kindly show. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that the law has been adopted unanimously in third readings, 42 votes for.
So if I could just thank members, and also I'd like to thank officers who have worked incredibly hard on this law over a number of years. Thank you, sir.
Of course, yes. Thank you, Minister. The next...
Sir, I would like to advise the Assembly that I will be leaving to attend doctor appointment and after I'll join online.
Thank you very much, Deputy. The next item is the draft Mutual Insurance Society transfer law lodged by the Chief Minister. The main respondent is the Chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny. I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Jersey Mutual Insurance Society Transfer Jersey Law 2000, a law to provide for the transfer of the undertaking of Jersey Mutual Insurance Society to Jersey Mutual Insurance Society Limited, a company limited by guarantee, on restructuring the society to a guaranteed company and for connected purposes. The State, subject to the sanction of His Most Excellent Majesty and Council, have adopted the following law.
Sir, thank you. I'm very pleased to say Deputy Ferry will be acting as rapporteur for this item.
Deputy Ferry.
Thank you, sir. So this legislation restructures the Jersey Mutual Insurance Society from a mutual society to a company limited by guarantee by transferring the whole business of the society to Jersey Mutual Insurance Society Limited. The society was incorporated under Edwardian legislation, specifically the Jersey Mutual Fire Insurance Society Incorporation Act, passed by the States of Jersey on the 13th of February 1908. And the society has recently celebrated its 150th anniversary in 2019. It remains Jersey's only insurance society, solely insuring properties in the island of Jersey, and is one of only 3 permit holders licensed by the Jersey Financial Services Commission to undertake insurance business in or from within Jersey, with the other insurance providers relying on their authorisations from other jurisdictions and passporting insurance services into Jersey. The society currently has approximately 8,500 members and insures property on the island valued at a combined value of over £8 billion, the majority of which are residential properties, supplemented by a small percentage of commercial properties. And it holds a market share of approximately 1/3 of the Jersey residential market. Following a review of the Society's governance arrangements in 2020 and 2021, consideration was given to changing current arrangements in order to fully comply with their regulatory obligations. The Executive Committee therefore recommended a restructure to a company limited by guarantee, and a period of consultation was undertaken with policyholders. The change in legal structure is a relatively popular option for mutual societies in the British Isles, with notable examples including the National Farmers Union Mutual Society Limited and the Cornish Mutual Assurance Company Limited. Fundamentally, this restructure strengthens the society's governance and preserves the mutual status of the society, something that we know is important to the society's members. The ownership of the society will remain the same post-restructuring. We have had a constructive dialogue with the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, who produced a supportive comments paper on this draft law, and the Legislation Advisory Panel have met with the society prior to lodging. So on that basis, sir, I propose the principles.
Are the principals second?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Liz Morrell.
Yes, sir. As a policyholder and member of the society, I wanted to ask whether stage members who are members of the Jersey Mutual Insurance Society, whether we should say it as a potential, to announce a conflict, so to speak.
The avoidance of doubt, yes, it's probably appropriate to make a declaration of interest.
In which case, sir, I am a member of the society.
Deputy Barbara Ward.
Yes, sir, I am also a member. Thank you.
Constable St Brillard.
Yes, that's right.
Constable St Martin.
As a member of the Goring Fate and Bonfire Committee, we receive substantial sponsorship from Jersey Mutual, for which we are very grateful. Thank you.
Constable St Helier.
We're insured through Jersey Mutual, sir.
Constable St Peter.
I'm insured through them, sir.
Deputy Powell.
I have a home insurance with Jersey Mutual Society. Does that mean I'm a member?
Yeah, we're all doing that.
Okay,
yes.
then I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Hegra.
Yes, sir. I have a house insurance policy with Jersey Mutual.
Likewise, sir, I have a house insurance policy.
Deputy Balash.
And I, sir.
And Deputy Iyer.
That's the I, sir.
Thank you. All members can vote. It's an interest shared by many. Yes. Who wishes to speak on the principles? Constable St Brillard.
Thank you, sir. It was brought to my attention by one of the directors who was concerned that in the changes the director's remuneration will no longer be indicated as it was in the past. Would the rapporteur just clarify the position of director, which, as we all know, a very local and well-respected team, and how their financial arrangements will be shown in the books of the Mutual Society in future? Thank you, sir.
Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. And I rise as the chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. We have undertaken a review of the draft law and presented comments which are there for members to read. I won't go into great detail. Members are able to read them, and Deputy Ferry has outlined very much of what I was going to say. But in closing, the panel supports the draft law to restructure Jersey Mutual from a mutual society to a company limited by guarantee, and accepts that this will enhance the corporate governance arrangements at Jersey Mutual. And we're satisfied that out of the several options that were considered in developing the draft law, the option that they have chosen, which is a restructure from a mutual society to a company limited by guarantee, provides the most advantages, which importantly includes the preservation of the mutual ethos and status of Jersey Mutual. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on the principles? I call upon Deputy Ferry to reply. Deputy Ferry.
Thank you, sir. And in relation to the Constable St Billard's question concerning remuneration, I took the opportunity to speak with correspond with the manager from the society, who explained to me that they will be introducing a remuneration committee. And actually what that will provide is more openness and transparency than is currently the case. So I'm satisfied that in that respect, this is a good move, and actually salaries should be more open and available, and it will stop any individual member voting on their own salary. I'd just like to thank Deputy Miles for her kind comments. We had a very constructive dialogue in scrutiny and a good exchange. So with that, sir, I maintain the principles and I call for the appel.
The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Principles have been adopted unanimously, 41 votes for. Deputy Miles, I need to ask you a matter of form. Does your panel wish to scrutinise this matter?
No, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Deputy Ferry, how do you wish to propose the articles in second reading?
There are 21 articles, sir, and I propose to take them en bloc.
Are the articles seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does anyone wish to speak on the articles in second reading? All those in favour of adopting the articles, kindly show. Thank you. The articles are adopted in second reading. Deputy Ferry, how do you wish to propose? Do you wish to propose the matter in third reading?
Yes, sir.
Is the matter seconded
Yes,
in
sir.
third reading? Does anyone wish to speak on the articles as adopted in third reading? Those in favour kindly show. The appell's been called for. I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce the law has been adopted unanimously in third reading, 40 votes for. The next item is the draft income support amendment number 2 regulations lodged by the Minister for Social Security. The main respondent is the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel. I'll ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Income Support Jersey Amendment Number 2 Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Articles 5 and 18 of the Income Support Jersey Law 2007.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to bring these regulations to the Assembly today. They are straightforward and I hope that members will support my proposals. As the Minister for Social Security, I have the responsibility for reviewing the income support benefit rates each year. This is Jersey's benefit for supporting the essential living costs of low-income households. The Minister must bring forward any proposals to change these income support component rates to the States Assembly. I am today proposing what I consider to be a sensible increase that reflects the Retail Price Index, RPIX figure for June 2025. This will take effect from the 1st of January 2026. This means that I am asking for approval for an across-the-board increase of most income support components of 4%. This is in line with the RPIX figure for June 2025 and is above the RPI low-income figure of 3.9%. This will ensure that income support will continue to reflect the needs of low-income households in Jersey. There are 2 exceptions to this proposed increase. The first is that I've proposed increasing the hostel accommodation rate by a larger amount, raising it to be equivalent to the same rate payable for people who live in lodgings. This component is used to support people living in hostel accommodations such as the shelter. The rate is currently £158.76 compared to the bedsit lodging rate of £192.15 per week. Although hostels don't offer self-contained accommodation, they do offer significant support services that form an essential part of the island's social safety net. Hostel providers offer more than a home to vulnerable people. They offer a specialist key worker service that supports residents to move on to more permanent accommodation. As the accommodation component is paid directly to the providers, an increase in the hostel accommodation rate will help the hostel providers in their overall financial position and support the important services they provide to our vulnerable residents. Therefore, I am asking for support to increase the rate to the equivalent that is paid for lodgings and bedsits in the private sector. The second is that I have not proposed an increase to the clinical cost component. This component was originally designed to help meet the cost of GP fees for individuals with additional health needs. Surgery GP consultations are now offered free for children and full-time students, and income support adults are automatically included in the health access scheme. This sets a patient fee of just £10 for a GP surgery consultation. This means that the need for extra support through the clinical cost component is significantly reduced, and so the component has not been increased in recent years. I am proposing that the component is maintained at its current level for 2026. The funding allocated of £2.8 million for 2026 allows for an overall increase of 4% across most components from their current level. The rates will be increased from the 1st of January 2026. As benefit is paid in advance, most households will see some of the increase in their last December payment, with the full increase showing in their first January payment. There are no staff or other resource implications to this proposal. Thank you, sir. I maintain the principles.
Thank you, Minister. Are the principles seconded? Yes, sir. Deputy Chair.
So I just wanted maybe to clarify potential conflict of interest as the chair of JAF. This potentially, the hostel accommodation particularly would affect JAF, and I just wanted to raise that. We're in discussions at the moment with the Minister's team to ensure that JAF also potentially could benefit like shelter. In the past we haven't, and so I just wanted to make sure that I put that on record. Thank you.
Deputy Dublé.
Thank you, sir. Just to very briefly make some points on behalf of my panel. And we looked at this, and I'll start by saying that the panel are supportive of the increases to the components. And interestingly enough, we did have a question. One of my panel members had a question about why the 4% was used rather than the 3.9%. And actually, it was quite interesting to look into that, because I wasn't aware of the difference of RPIX and RPI low income. And it's been quite interesting to learn about that. And I wasn't aware that RPI low income is a Jersey specific measure that isn't used elsewhere, that looks at the households that are in the lowest 20% of income. And I actually think that that's very intelligent way to be making these decisions. And I thank the Minister for giving that considered approach to this policy area. And yes, no further points were raised by the panel, and we were supportive. Thank the Minister for her work.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on the principles? I call upon the Minister to reply. Minister.
Thank you, sir. I would like to thank the panel chair and her panel for their support. We do work collaboratively together, and I look forward to continuing to do so. With that, sir, I maintain the principles and call for the appel.
Thank you, Minister. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats, and I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce the principles have been adopted unanimously. 42 votes for. Deputy Dublé, I must, as a matter of form, as you know, ask you if you wish to scrutinise this matter.
No, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Minister, do you wish to propose the regulations in second reading?
Yes, sir.
Is that en bloc?
Yes, en bloc, please.
And are the regulations seconded in second reading? Does anyone wish to speak on the regulations in second reading? Those in favour of adopting the regulations, kindly show.
Appel, please, sir.
The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. can announce the regulations have been adopted unanimously in second reading, 40 votes for. Minister, do you propose the regulations as adopted in third reading?
Yes, sir, I do.
Thank you. Is the matter seconded? Yes, sir. Does anyone wish to speak on the regulations as adopted in third reading? Is the appel called for? Is the appel being called for?
Yes. It will be at some point, sir.
Well, this is the moment. I invite the greffier to open the voting on third reading. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, I invite the greffier to close the voting. I can announce the regulations have now been adopted. The vote in third reading was unanimously in favour, 40 votes for. Now move on to Commonwealth Parliamentary Association election observers, lodged by the Connotab of St Helier. The main respondent is the chair of the Privileges and Procedures Committee. I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to request the chair of the Privileges and Procedures Committee to invite election observers from the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association to monitor and report on the general election to be held on 7th of June 2026.
Connotab.
Thank you, sir. I should probably explain to members that this proposition was written in a hurry. In fact, I think it's the only time I've ever done a report and proposition at the end of a debate before leaving the chamber. So it was done quite quickly. As members can see, it's not a very long document. But I was, as I explain in the report, quite flabbergasted by the outcome of my attempt to some extent, make amends for the introduction of senators at the expense of, in particular, representation for deputies in St Helier by bringing an amendment to the legislation which failed by the narrowest of margins. It would only have taken a ring binder of whatever colour to have made it go the other way, but sadly there was no ring binder in the chamber. So it does seem to me that given the changes that we have adopted to next year's election, and indeed the changes that we are now being proposed to be debating in the new year around, for example, the declaration of results and so on, that next year's election is going to have a lot of novelty about it. And it would be very appropriate to have it peer reviewed by the CPA for that reason. Perhaps while they're here, they could nip across to our sister island if there are transport options available, and see how the adoption of an island-wide mandate in Guernsey, and actually the removal of the constables, is affecting the way Guernsey democracy functions. But in any case, we as a branch of the CPA, we participate, all of us I think participate in conferences and seminars, and indeed some members have been election observers, with the lucky ones going off to the Caribbean to do their election observing in their Bermuda shorts. And I think that it would behove us as an assembly to make the very modest outlay, which we are told is about £30,000, to invite some of our parliamentary colleagues from around the Commonwealth to view the conduct of our elections next year and make recommendations accordingly. PPC in their comments, which I'm grateful, point out firstly that we already have a sort of peer review in the Jersey Electoral Authority, which will be present and which will make a report. And they also point out, somewhat depressingly, that the States Assembly probably won't pay any attention to the report anyway. But so I do believe that I don't think anybody in this Assembly could put their hand on the heart and say that we have got it right at the moment. Our electoral system is clearly evolving. It's evolving towards a state when hopefully future assemblies won't have to debate it. But given the anomalies which we have recently introduced and which we may well be introducing in January, I do think that there will be merit in having it peer reviewed by the CPA, and accordingly I propose the propositions. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable. Is the proposition seconded? Yes, sir. Does anyone wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Iyer.
Thank you, sir. Members will have seen the comments from PPC on the proposition from the Conotable of St Helier. If members decide to adopt the Conotable's proposition, the committee will make arrangements for an election observation mission to take place next year. There will be a budgetary implication of doing so. We estimate that it would cost approximately £35,000. The 2026 budget for the States Assembly does not take into account that expenditure. But if members adopt this proposition, PPC will do its best to accommodate that sum within the existing budget, although there is always a risk that trying to find money for an unbudgeted matter will impact on spending elsewhere. It was the previous PPC who decided not to invite an election observation mission. It is not an obligation for there to be such a mission at each election. The previous PPC was aware of the cost of such a mission and also took into account that there had been missions at the 2 previous elections. It was therefore decided not to issue an invitation for 2026, but to wait until the 2030 election. As PPC has mentioned in our comments, the absence of such a mission does not mean there is no independent oversight of elections in Jersey, as the Jersey Electoral Authority is also now in place and will produce its own report on the conduct of the elections in 2026. As it is, PPC recognises the potential benefits of an election observation mission, but there are a couple of notes of caution I would mention. One is whether a mission in 2026 will truly deliver on what the Conotable is seeking. An observation mission will focus on the administration of the elections, whether they are held effectively and fairly. Such a mission will not look at the electoral system we have in place, and we might not therefore see any recommendations for an observation mission on the reintroduction of senators. Secondly, there is no guarantee that the Assembly will heed and implement any recommendations from an observation mission. Improvements have been made on the basis of the recommendations we received in 2018 and 2022. But previous missions have also highlighted that substantial changes to the electoral system should not be made within 1 year of an election. This current Assembly has not followed that recommendation, as the Constable mentioned in his opening speech. Further assemblies might therefore choose to ignore any recommendations made in 2026. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. As someone who has been an election observer for the CPA at the UK general election, I can guarantee the Constable of St Helier I was not in shorts, even though it was June, because our day started at 6:30 in the morning, and I think got back to the hotel around 3:30 the following morning, only to have to get up at 8 a.m. to get to train to get back to London. It was probably one of the busiest professional days of my life. It was also very interesting, very gratifying. It was a very interesting process to watch and observe. There's a point that the chair of PPC made about the role of the CPA is to make sure that elections are fair. And of course, actually, that is the question that we need to ensure is still the case, sir. So I'm trying not to sound sour grapes because obviously I'm a deputy of St Helier who is now going to see his parish underrepresented by the decision that this Assembly has made. And so, sir, I will be supporting this proposition because I think we need to keep a record of what we have done, what its impacts are, and so I think that should be recorded and presented back to the next Assembly so hopefully adjustments can be made so we can get our elections back to being fair.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else speak on the proposition? Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to speak on this because I think the importance of election observation through the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association must not be underestimated by this Assembly or any other Assembly. Whether an Assembly chooses to ignore advice and ignore the recommendations is up to that Assembly, but it does not mean they should not exist, and it does not mean it does not provide a record, a historic record of those recommendations, which is something that will need to be answered for at some time in any democracy. And I have led election observation missions. It was through the CPA, and I was very, very proud to represent Jersey in doing so. They are important things to do. It has enriched my experience of being a parliamentarian, and that role of being a parliamentarian is really important for all of us, and it enriches the role of many parliamentarians with their involvement of the CPA around the world. We bat above our weight as Jersey in the CPA. There is no doubt about that as a small island, and that is really important for us because it puts Jersey right front and centre of a huge organisation that is worldwide. Therefore, the acceptance and the use of election observers, I think, is an integral part of that. The argument, and I understand why I was equally disappointed, I think the most disappointing thing for me, apart from the lack of representation of St Helier Deputy, I agree with that, was the fact that we did take action within the year of an election, despite recommendations that would be made for any parliament not to do that. But that does not mean that in the future we therefore say, I tell you what, let's not bother even looking at what we're doing. Let's not have that observation. Let's not have that rigorous look, independent look at what we do in our elections. And if they come to the same conclusions, then they come to the same conclusions. There is an integral point there that needs to be looked upon by us as members of this Parliament, if that keeps repeating. Sometimes, sir, we all have to be told something more than once before we act on it. We all have to repeatedly have something pointed out about the way that we are, on what our procedures and what we do before we actually act on it. And the CPA observation missions give us a proven approach to looking at the fairness of our elections. So one of the things, for example, I learned from my observation mission, it was in the Cayman Islands, and just to make before the FOI goes in, it didn't cost us anything at all. It was paid for entirely by the CPA, nothing on island. I also observed the US elections, something I paid for myself, out of my own interest. And it was interesting, in both of those elections, they have referendum questions on the paper. They have 3 referendum questions at the same time. And I was hoping to bring a proposition to say that perhaps we should, I will actually, sir, we should explore having referendum questions on our election papers to engage people in pertinent questions for our island. It's too quick now, sir, because it's within a year of the election, so I would not want to do that. Perhaps it's something I could bring for the next iteration of this Assembly to look at carefully. And those are the types of things that you see when you observe that become useful for your democracy later on. And so there are subtle pieces of advice that come to these observations that will help us all if we look carefully at what we're doing in terms of our elections. So I hope the Assembly can support this. Of course it has a cost. But, sir, we have a functioning and important democracy. The cost of that, the value of that, is way beyond any cost for maintaining that and ensuring it has integrity, sir. So I urge members to support the Constable in this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Colin Tarbison-Brillau.
Thank you, sir. There are 2 things, actually. I was surprised that my colleague, the Constable St Helier, didn't mention the word gerrymandering, because I know in every speech prior to this he tends to, so I expect it to come up in his summing up. The main point from my standing, sir, is over the question of cost and the £35,000. I'm fully aware, sir, that there is a shortfall in funding as a result of the Sunday elections and the necessity for additional payments which will arise from that. And it may be that before gaily saying, yes, we can afford the £35,000, we need to just agree where that's coming from, because at this moment in time, sir, it's not at all clear. So perhaps the proposer could suggest where that might come from. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Connotab. Deputy Jean.
Thank you, sir, and I'll be supporting the Connotab's proposition. I believe that we've made many changes to our electoral system, and I think those major changes aren't just small adjustments, but do need looking at. For example, we've reintroduced island-wide senators, we've changed the constituencies, the amount of deputies, we've adjusted roles, responsibilities, we've introduced automatic voter registration, we're voting on a Sunday, we may get the results on Monday, we're widening who can vote. These are big changes, these are not small adjustments. And I believe we need to have that independent scrutiny of these new processes and how that affects our democratic system. And this is because I have also been an election observer in the UK at the last general election on behalf of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Assembly, and I saw firsthand how even well-established democracies can still experience concerns. Like Deputy Coles, we had a very long day, starting very early and ending at night, and we were all posted at different places around the UK, and when we came back together to write our report, we realised there were some elements that did come out of this, and still these concerns. That means that even the UK does need to do some adjustments. We found issues around clarity of candidate information, voter awareness, the introduction of voter ID cards and what constitutes a valid ID card. Many are people turning up at the areas to vote where I was observing brought wrong ID cards, and so were sent away and had to go and find some others, or were not able to because they didn't have the right ID cards. There was concerns about legal framework being complex and fragmented, delayed in postal voting. We even saw that here for the Jersey, with you, and there was failures in ballot secrecy and online campaign harassment, especially against women. So I just wanted to highlight that even though the UK, again, is an considered advanced democracy, and maybe had only changed a few adjustments, made less adjustments than we have to their electoral system, there was a need for that observations, because as I've outlined, we found quite a few issues that needed to be, or hope the UK will make those adjustments the next time it has the elections, and therefore that is why I think it's important for Jersey to also have this independent observation when we're testing the system, the many changes that we made, and make sure that we feel that we can trust our democratic system going forward.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Breniff.
Thank you, sir. And particularly glad to follow Deputy Jean, who's made some points that I won't have to cover because she's made them so well. But so when we debated senators last, I made a throwaway comment in my speech to the effect that the Commonwealth observers may judge us harshly when they come to write their report on the next election. And it didn't occur to me when I was speaking that there wouldn't be observers coming to review the election, but of course I was soon put right on that. And as he said, the proposer was equally caught off guard by the realisation that there was no plan to have observers. And I recall he actually said to me in the Assembly that evening that he planned to put in a proposition to rectify that omission. I didn't realise that he would act quite so quickly, but I'm glad he did. And in case it feels like we are putting ourselves unnecessarily in the spotlight, it is worth, I think, reflecting on just how normal it is to have election observers. Last year's UK election had a CPA observer mission, as we know, because 3 of our own members took part in it. Guernsey had a CPA mission for their election this year, as they did in their previous election in 2020. Cayman Islands had a CPA mission into their election this year. The Isle of Man's last election in 2021 had a CPA mission. And in Europe, elections are routinely observed in all European countries, not by the CPA, but by the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe. So having independent observers is part of the good housekeeping, if you like, that we should expect in a democracy. But I think it does also go slightly further than that, because we also have a particular interest in suggesting that observers should be present at the next election. One of the reasons for having observers at the last election was that the system had changed with the creation of new multi-member seats and the removal of senators. And at this coming election, we've changed the system again, and Deputy Jean has run through the significant ways, not just to do with the senators, that the election has changed. It will be different for how it was in 22. In 2022, it was considered worthwhile to have those observers, and I think even if you take out the senators' changes in this coming election, there are enough changes for us to have an added stimulus to have that independent outside review, not just from our own internal electoral body. In terms of money, we are, as I alluded to in a question yesterday, I think already spending money to introduce senators in terms of renewed publicity, election organisation, law drafting, and so on. And I think we should therefore be happy to follow through the logic. And if we're prepared to spend money changing the system, we should be happy to spend money ensuring that it works well. And the chair of PPC, I think, has said that he thinks with reasonable degree of confidence that money can be found from within existing budgets. So I don't think this is primarily about whether you're for or against the changes that have been brought in to bring back senators. When senators were removed, we had an observer mission. So the consistent principle is that when the election system changes significantly, it is good to have that independent oversight. So I think that on that basis, I hope that all members are able to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Conor St John.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I will also be supporting the Constable of St Helier's request. Sir, last week I was at a subcommittee meeting of a PPC and I was shocked, sir, to learn that we were considering reducing the amount of polling stations rather than increasing the amount of polling stations. I thought it was a joke, sir. I was absolutely shocked. Sir, in terms of the funding in P104 2025, which we won't debate until 4.5 months before an election, sir, it talks about the fact at present around 25 temporary staff are employed to assist with the administration of elections, including the pre-poll process and an increase in postal voting. It is expected to intensify the administrative burden and requirement for additional temporary staff, sir. So our island is built on the voluntary system, sir, and I guarantee you, sir, the voluntary system would provide people who could do these jobs without getting paid, sir. We could save money in that area and we could invest the £35,000 so that we can have an independent review by the CPA, sir. The chair of PPC reminded us that the Jersey Electoral Authority were going to do a report, sir. Well, that to me seems like marking your own homework. Sir, I'm really concerned about the forthcoming election, the lateness of changes, and a whole range of things, sir, and I'll have a lot more to say in January when we have our next debate. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conor. Does anyone else want to speak? Dr. Tellier.
Thank you, sir. The Constable of St Helier may not have mentioned gerrymandering or gerrymander, so I'll do it, and maybe he can refer to it again in his summing up. He's already been invited to do that by the Constable of St Brelard. But I think we should be a little bit more patriotic when we talk about the gerrymander, because it's not just any old gerrymander that we've got in Jersey, it's a Jersey-specific gerrymander, and so we should consider the spelling of that. Instead of spelling it with a G, G-E-R-R-Y, and then Mander at the end, which we know, of course, was named after the person who introduced it, whose name was Jerry. We've got our own Jerry in Jersey, which is J-E, accent grave, 2 R's and an I, sir, and then M-A-N-D-E-R, and that would be a gerrymander that we can be proud of in Jersey, that's fit for the Jersey context. And as we are due to debate the intellectual property new legislation and rules in a couple of weeks, it might be time for the government of Jersey or the states of Jersey to put their own copyright in on that particular gerrymander, because it is a Jersey-specific one. It's one which says that in an island of 100,000 people, let's try and make the system as complex as possible, because it's all right, because at least we understand it, even if nobody else does in the voting public. And part of me is a bit torn about this, because I do see the overriding compelling arguments, logical arguments that the Constable of St Helier is putting forward. I tend to agree with what Deputy Jean has said. There are so many changes and variables not least the Sunday election and the reversion back to senators. And we've never had an election where we've had an election of senators, constables and this kind of deputy, because in the past it was a different type of deputy that was elected, which bears, it just has the same name, but they're not the same roles. So we might as well call them, X, Y, or Z, because they're not the deputies that used to exist. So it's absolutely logical that we should invite them, but it's also true what the chair of PPC says, is that in the past, we've tended to ignore what the election observers say, and that we have such an outlying system now in terms of our electoral norms that they're so far away from any of the Commonwealth or indeed international parliamentary norms that you'd expect, not just in best practice, but in anywhere like good practice, that what do we expect any impartial and half-intelligent observers to say about our system? I mean, I think they could write 3/4 of their report before even coming to Jersey, just by studying our electoral system, and say it's absolutely bonkers. But so do we invite them over and simply say so that they can have a good laugh? Do we invite them over to Jersey so that once they've been over, they can sit round perhaps at their Commonwealth or international after dinner parliamentary drinks and say to each other, have you heard of Jersey? No. Well, let me tell you about it. Well, it's got 100,000 people there, very small, but they have 3 different types of elected member. Don't be silly. No, go on. So, no, I'm not pulling your leg. And they used to have a system whereby they got rid of this island-wide system, and they thought it's completely wrong that they have members getting elected on a few hundred votes. So they changed the system and to have 2 types of states member and make sure that most of the membership got more of a stronger mandate and a uniform mandate. Well, that sounds sensible. Oh yeah, but they didn't do it properly. They still kept 12 of their members, most of whom would be elected in very small districts, often in uncontested elections, albeit with, of course, the illusion of the ability to vote for none of the above, or at least to have a choice, the illusion of choice by voting for none of the above. Now, so this sounds like a mess. Well, and you went there, did you? And what was it like? Oh, no, but it is a democracy, is it? Yes, apparently it's a member of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. Well, I never. You learn something new every day. And of course, what will they say about our system? And already we're hearing strange things about the Sunday election. We're hearing there's resistance to the Sunday election, which I believe is being done for the right reasons. There's the motivation to try something different. We don't always have to look north. We can look to our European neighbours which have elections on a Sunday. Why do they have them on a Sunday? Because traditionally that's a day when many people don't have to work. And of course we already have the naysayers out there saying it's not going to make any difference. Well, it might not, but let's see. At least it gives an opportunity to others who might work 6 days a week to come out and vote. And what will the consequences of a Sunday election be? That is something that the election observers might wish to consider. But we're already getting what I feel is the punitive pushback from some of the established helpers and volunteers and adjuvants who might be involved, at least from a parish point of view, saying, well, if you're going to insist that we come in on a Sunday night, we're not going to let you have the results until the Monday morning or until well into the Monday, because that's how it feels to me. It's like if you're going to make us work on a Sunday night, then we need to go home and have some sleep, and we're going to come back and open the ballot boxes. And of course, what's that going to do for the conspiracy theorists in our society saying, oh, that's very suspicious, isn't it? Normally in the past, they used to do all of the counts on the same night, but now they're locking them up, and where are the ballot boxes going? Are they stuffing the ballot boxes? And of course, nothing like that would ever happen in Jersey, but it doesn't mean that the tongues won't start to wag. We do have to be aware that even in Jersey, it is possible for untoward things to happen. And I only have to recall back to the 2013 referendum where somebody allegedly overheard an official in one of the parishes whispering to somebody in the ballot box, option B. And then they duly noted it and made some kind of report. I don't know what happened with that. And of course, I think the person in charge may have been given some words of advice. I'm not too sure, sir, but it certainly was something that was documented and commented on at the time. So even in Jersey, there are things that do need to be observed. And so I would say, sir, that of course election observers are most welcome to come to Jersey, but we do have to be mindful of the fact that often we don't like being told what to do with our system by outsiders. We don't take on the advice even of those from whom we pay sums of money to go away and do reports for us. And when they come back and say, this is what you need to do with your system, we'll say, well, thanks very much, but we're going to ignore that and we'll just do what we've always done anyway. And if we can make it worse and gerrymander it a bit worse, then we'll probably also do that as well, sir. So I'm not sure with this one, sir. I need to be convinced by the Constable of St Helier that this is actually going to make a difference, or will it just be a waste of everybody's time and money in bringing people to Jersey who will look at our system? And of course, the other way to look at it is, I've portrayed it in a very one way, is that we have a unique and unusual system which should be defended at all costs. And that's no doubt what some people like Deputy Gorst will say in defending the undemocratic and otherwise undefensible. But of course, he's able to make those points, sir. But so, yeah, in normal circumstances, in normal places, election observers are to be welcomed and are a normal part of the electoral furniture, so to speak, sir. But because Jersey's not normal, I'm not sure whether we should be following that logic, sir.
So, point of clarification, please.
Are you prepared to give way for point of clarification?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I misheard or misunderstood the deputy, but I thought he seemed to be saying that the problem with the Sunday elections was the adjoint, because knowing a number of the adjoint, they have all very high levels of public service, and I would be quite surprised if they were saying they weren't going to do what they were asked to do by law and by this assembly. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
I'm happy to clarify. So what I'm saying is that there are already rumours going around, and there's talk about the count being done on the Monday, not on the Sunday. I don't know who that's come from. What I'm saying is that there should be enough people in the island, especially given the fact that we probably haven't asked lots of people to come forward and volunteer, and the fact that people can work in shifts, to say that if the candidates wish for the count to be concluded on the Sunday, then I would hope that all of those involved in the count would take that on board, and that actually candidates would say, after campaigning for a period of 6 gruelling weeks, that for some people to stay up a few hours longer to finish the count on that same period shouldn't be too much to ask if we value democracy in our small island.
Chief Minister.
Thank you. I always genuinely do enjoy listening to the lamentations of Deputy Tadiad, and I did enjoy that. Didn't agree with it all, but I did enjoy that, notwithstanding the time of day. Let's just talk briefly about Sunday elections, which was an idea we said we'd try. I'm not convinced it will work, but we have to try. And what we have to focus on is to grow the engagement of the public, of the electorate in the elections. Constable of St John said he was surprised to learn that there were talk about reducing the number of polling stations. I'm surprised there's talk to shut up shop at 8 o'clock on the Sunday and go home and worry about counting the vote the next day. I think that's one sure way to disengage people from the electoral process. What I do, and I've discussed it with the chair briefly in my office in the corridor, we had a chat earlier with members and the chair of the committee, and we don't think there's any problem at all. There's no rumours of Ajwa or supporters or helpers. They are keen to play their part in the community. There's something exciting about an election day. There's something exciting about staying at the count and getting it all done and dusted. That engages the community. We found it hard enough to retain that engagement. We lost something in the last elections, probably because we didn't have an island-wide mandate, but we shall see in the next elections what sort of impact that has. So we certainly don't need to be talking about doing things that will detract from interest in the elections. In relation to certain members, Deputy Renouf, I think, said that it's not people who were against the island-wide mandate supporting this. although it would seem on the surface that it was our Scotch, that myth, because I'm a great supporter of the island-wide mandate at this a moment in time, but I'm going to support the Connaught Harp today, because I don't think there'd be any harm coming from observance of our elections, and we don't always agree with what the suggestions that follow that, but I think there can be no harm for a continuous cycle of observance, so we can continue to improve and focus on what is one of the most important things that this island should be able to rely upon and count upon, is engagement with the democratic and electoral process. I'm not sure how observers will help with that, but if we get at least one good solid recommendation out of that, then it's worthwhile. I just want to finish by reiterating once again, there is no pushback, as Deputy Miller alluded to, from the Ashwell or the volunteers that I'm aware of, and I've spoken to a number of them and the returning officers who consider it a great honour and privilege to do that job as part of their duty, and many of them are looking forward to the next elections. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Deputy Balash.
So I was going to say that I hope that the Assembly is not going to divide as if this were a debate on senators, and I'm therefore rather heartened to hear the Chief Minister say that he is going to support the Constable of St Helier. It does seem rather curious, in one sense, to invite an international body to supervise an election in Jersey when we know it is highly likely that they will be critical of the decision to make a significant change only months before the election. But that's really why we have to invite them, it seems to me, because I was arguing yesterday for an open democracy, for not doing things behind closed doors. And if we don't invite the Commonwealth observers to come along, will people begin to think, well, of course they don't invite the Commonwealth observers. They know they've done something which is inappropriate and contrary to international rules, and they don't want to be criticised for it. I don't think we can do that. I think we have made a decision. We have to stand by it. We have to explain it if necessary. But we need to have the Commonwealth observers here.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I was interested, I very much enjoyed listening to Deputy Tadier as well. Seemed to be going one way and then he went another, which is not unusual. I'm trying to think, and what really impressed me about his speech was his actual focus at the end on value for money. What we really get from this? We get a report of recommendations that we might take on board. We won't seen it sort of mentioning that we should be doing this or that, or that we had a choice to do one thing or the other. And I think we forget how amazing, actually, in terms of the delivery of the work involving the counting of votes, how well that's gone on in the past, thanks to the people who volunteer in this area. And I remember on one occasion somebody who didn't get into a senatorial post asking for a recount. And the reason she had asked for a recount was that some islanders had expressed concern about a rumour that a ballot box had gone missing for a certain period. And anyway, the recount took place and it confirmed the result, but she also got a lot of criticism for asking for the recount. You know, the actual expense, the time and all these things. So she wasn't going to really win in that respect, and she certainly didn't win on the vote. But this, when I saw the PPC's or read about the PPC's latest proposition about delaying the count, I thought, oh, right, how many ballot boxes are going to be in places where people would say that they've got access up, and then you're going to introduce this at a late notice? Oh, and why don't we invite the Commonwealth advisors along and have them comment on that too? But I think even before I saw that proposal, I was somewhat sceptical about the value of the Commonwealth advisors, and particularly concerned because I know we've got a budget debate coming on very soon. We've had a report from the fiscal policy panel talking about the way that our finances are. And it's all very well somebody saying, well, I think you can find the money, but I think almost inevitably they're going to need that money for something else. So I happen to be with Deputy Taddy with this one, so, and I hope I've explained why.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. I'm not going to say a great deal. The one observation I would make about the potential deferral of the count is that many of our polling stations are in schools, and the schools will be open the following day, so that creates another logistical error. What I really wanted to say, however, is I'm really disappointed by the remarks, I think, by Deputy Taddy about the Jersey Electoral Authority. That authority was established by this Assembly, I think, in the previous term. This Assembly established that body. I believe 2 of the members, it's additional work that has been foisted on them as part of their roles in the public service. The people who have been appointed, I believe, through an appointments commission.
So could I ask the member to give way? I think she may be. I don't think I mentioned the electoral authority at all, and I didn't refer to them.
Well,
Do you withdraw that comment then?
Sorry, it was the Councillor St John. I apologise to Deputy Taddy, but someone, and I apologise to Deputy Taddy, said we can't rely on the Jersey Electoral Authority because it's like marking your own homework. What is the point of establishing a body to report and investigate and run our elections if we can't have any faith or trust in them? What does that do for the public view? What does it do for the political view? If we establish a body, we have to trust them to do their job. The people who are on that, I think, are not remunerated, or they're not remunerated very significantly. They have come forward as volunteers, and we're now saying we can't trust them to a good job. And I think that's incredibly disappointing. And if we take that attitude, we may as well just disband them altogether. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Constable of St Lawrence.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd just like to address a couple of remarks that Deputy Taddy made about the count being on the Sunday and rumours going around, and I'm not really clear what those rumours are, about the count, the election being on the Sunday and the count not taking place until the Monday. What I'd like to tell him is that the constables really don't have anything to do with elections now, because the Assembly some years ago made the decision that that should be dealt with by the parish secretaries. And don't make any comment on that decision. But the parish secretaries have been crying out for some months now to actually find out when the count will take place. It is not their decision. It is the decision of, as I understand it, of the jurats, the autorise, who will make the ultimate decision as to when the count takes place, be it on the Sunday or be it on the following day, on the Monday. So I believe that I am correct in making that statement. And what I would say is that I understand the parish secretaries and therefore the parishes actually want the count to take place on the Sunday. They do not want to have to go back in on the Monday. They will be exhausted because leading up to the election, it's a very busy time for the parish administration. So I'd just like to reassure Deputy Taddy that if the count can be made on the Sunday, the parishes are fully behind that decision, but it does not lie within their remit. It lies within the authority of the jurats. Coming back to the proposition as it stands, I'm not actually sure that I'm going to support this. It's likely, as we have seen, to cost many thousands of pounds to invite election observers over. And it seems to me that it's surprising how money can suddenly be found for these things. Does it mean that there's too much money sloshing around somewhere, underspent? You know, waiting to be spent on what? Oh, well, we'll invite the election observers over. The Constable of St Bernard, when he spoke earlier in the debate, referenced money needing to be found. He didn't really explain clearly, as far as I was concerned, about that money, but actually it's costing the parishes to run these elections. I think we have these discussions every time there's an election, and I've been here for a number of those. The electoral law states that, or the elections law states that the constables will be responsible for the expenses of the constable's election. However, the state is responsible for the costs of an election for deputies and or senators. So from next year, we have the additional cost of running a senatorial election, notwithstanding that they are all on the same day. And as I understand it, the Constables Committee at the moment is waiting to hear back from the Treasury Minister to have confirmation that there will be money available to pay the parishes for running these elections, the elections for deputies and for senators. Particularly, I think the committee is particularly concerned because the election being held on the Sunday means that, depending on the statements of employment or the contracts of employment with parish staff, it is likely that most staff members will need to be on double pay for the Sunday. And I'm not sure that any or many of us have actually budgeted for that. So it's unfortunate that the Treasury Minister has already spoken, but I just remind her that we did write to her a month ago and we are still waiting to hear back from her on that matter. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Constable. Does anyone wish to speak on this proposition? Deputy House.
Thank you, sir. And I rise to offer a little bit of history, I suppose, as a member of the previous PPC and the current PPC, and also to address some of the comments around the budget for this. When the previous PPC initially made this decision, there wasn't the scope of substantial changes that have now been proposed. I think Deputy Stern mentioned a few of them. That she also, I don't think she mentioned her own proposition about bringing down the voter eligibility down to 1 year. So there has been quite substantial changes, including the introduction of senators. So the last set of electoral reforms was actually based on the previous CPA report in 2018, and I was also a member of the electoral reform subcommittee that worked on that. And the CPA did comment on the system back then, and they actually used the words that it was complicated and cumbersome. So the CPA are well within their right to look at our electoral system, not just the administration of it. With regards to the budget, I just wanted to highlight to members that as we will be in a pre-election period, there may be some cost savings associated, for example, with the reduced activity of the Assembly, with the reduced activity of scrutiny. There will also potentially, I think, be a couple of possible, so things like reduced travel, like a conference or two that we may also miss out on during that election, and obviously, you know, webcasting and transcribing costs and things like that. So there is the scope and there are options to find the budget to cover this. So I think it's already been highlighted, and I think Deputy Reniff mentioned it, as did the Constable of St John. I think as an Assembly, we should welcome any opportunity for any external research to be conducted here. It's important that we are able to have some evidence that highlights the pros and cons, and obviously this formed the basis of the last set of changes, which I'd like to remind members took over. I think when I proposed some of those changes, I think I mentioned in my speech that it had taken over 99 propositions to get to that point. So I think as an Assembly, we should be endorsing independent external research. And I don't think anyone is saying that they don't trust the JEA, but I think it is important to say that you know, the CPA have experts in different fields, including those that will look at our legislation. There's also been a lot of change in our electoral legislation, and although we have obviously very, very competent law drafters in this area, it is always good to have a fresh set of eyes look at them. So, sir, I hope that on that basis that members will support this. This is a positive thing, and I think it is important in the name of transparency, like Deputy Balash mentioned, that we support this proposition and invite the CPA observers to come over. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this proposition? I call upon the Connotab to reply.
Thank you, sir. And when the last speaker got to their button just before you closed the debate, I sighed a bit because I thought we could bring this to a conclusion. But how pleased I am that Deputy Alves was allowed to speak, because she, perhaps more than any other member, knows the territory. And she did a great summing up, so I could just simply sit down, I think, and go to the vote. But I will just refer to a couple of things. First of all, as Deputy Alves says, no criticism is intended, I believe, by anyone who's spoken, nor by me, of anyone involved in our elections. It's a shame that, you know, that some references were made to them, but they all do a fantastic job. And in fact, the Constable of St John said there are opportunities for more volunteers to be involved to help further defray the costs of this particular election observation mission if it is approved. So no criticism is intended. Other cost savings were referred to by Deputy Alves. And actually, I'm not very good at arithmetic. I know Deputy Alves is. She probably could have told us what proportion of the budget of this island the cost of the election observation would be, but it will be pretty tiny, pretty small. And yet the benefits, as several members described, are about being up there with other democracies that we want to stand shoulder to shoulder with. I was quite surprised to hear from some members what Deputy Tadier was talking about us being the butt of jokes in CPA canteens. I don't think of Jersey like that. I think of Jersey as a world-class financial services centre, as a well-respected centre for tourism, for environment, for heritage, for sport. We do punch above our weight, as the former Chief Minister Frank Walker used to say. And I think we have nothing to fear from the CPA sending a mission to us. Several members wandered a bit off topic. We spent quite a bit of time talking about Sunday elections, and that's something which we can look forward to doing after Christmas. But I was grateful to those members who gave their support and who pointed out that this is not, this debate is not inviting people who don't support the senators, for example, to get going. And that's actually why I didn't use the G word in my speech, although it is in my report. Because this is not about whether we think the current system is good or bad. It's about opening us up to scrutiny, to transparency. After all, we allow our financial services to be scrutinised by Moneyval, and nobody objects to that. Why not allow our democracy to be scrutinised? Because surely our democracy is one of the most precious things. It may not seem so to the public sometimes, but I think we know, being in this place, that democracy is vital, and anything we can learn from an electoral observation mission next year will be useful. So, sir, I don't believe, I think I've covered most of the questions, and I maintain the proposition. Thank you, sir. Ask for the appel.
It has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. I announce the proposition has been adopted. 32 votes for, 13 votes contra. Yes.
Those voting for the Conotub of St Helier, St Peter's, St Martin, St John, Grouville, St Juan, St Mary and St Saviour, deputies Southern, Tadia, Luce, Morale, Lahegara, Rob Ward, Alves, Farnham, Mezek, Balash, Coles, Porray, Wall, Miles, Catherine Curtis, Faltham, Jern, Howell, Kovac and Wilson, and online deputies Renouf, Binet and Gardner, and the Conotub of St Clement. Those voting contre, the Conotubs of St Lawrence, St Brallard and Trinity, and deputies Ayer, Gorst, Moore, Scott, Rose Binet, Miller, Ferry, Alex Curtis and Barbara Ward, and Deputy Andrews.
The next item is Health and Safety Appeal Tribunal, reappointment of Chair and Deputy Chair, lodged by the Minister for Social Security. The main respondent is the Chair of the Health and Social Security Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion, in accordance with the Health and Safety at Work Appeal Tribunal Jersey Regulations 1989, to reappoint for a period of 3 years the following persons as Chair and Deputy Chair of the Health and Safety at Work Appeal Tribunal to determine appeals against prohibition and improvement notices served by health and safety inspectors and decisions by the Minister on licensing provisions under the law, commencing immediately. Advocate Cyril Whelan as Chair, Advocate Niall MacDonald as Deputy Chair.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I'm very pleased to recommend that the Assembly reappoints Advocate Cyril Whelan as Chair and Advocate Niall MacDonald as Deputy Chair of the Health and Safety at Work Appeal Tribunal for a further 3-year term. The two individuals have served as Chair and Deputy Chair since 2022, and I am grateful that they have confirmed that they wish to continue in these roles for a further 3 years. The Health and Safety Appeal Tribunal hears appeals against administrative sanctions, prohibition and improvement notices served by health and safety inspectors and decisions by the Minister on licensing provisions under the law. The tribunal consists of a chair, who shall be an advocate or solicitor, a deputy chair who shall be an advocate or solicitor, as well as 2 other members. All members are appointed by the states. I am confident that both individuals have the skills necessary to uphold the fairness and integrity of the tribunal system. Sir, I am pleased to recommend the reappointments to the Assembly and I make the proposition.
Thank you, Minister. Is the proposition seconded? Does anyone wish to speak on the proposition? Those in favour of adopting the proposition kindly show. Thank you. The proposition is adopted. The next item is the Income Support Medical Appeal Tribunal, reappointment of chair. And I ask lodged by the Minister, the main respondent is the chair of the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the Greffier to read the proposition.
The states are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to reappoint, in accordance with Article 9 of the Income Support Jersey Law 2007, further to a process overseen by the Jersey Appointments Commission, the following person as the chair of the Income Support Medical Appeal Tribunal for the period stated against their name. Advocate Simon Thomas, 4 years.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Before I address this specific proposition, I will say that it may not have escaped members' notice the similarity between this proposition and the following 2 propositions that will be made. The reason for that similarity is we have the same chair for 3 different tribunals, and I need to bring that as 3 separate propositions. I did seek to see if we could be more efficient in that, but as they're separate, they do need to be approved separately. Sir, I am very pleased to recommend that the Assembly reappoints Advocate Simon Thomas as Chair of the Income Support Medical Appeal Tribunal for a further 4 years. Advocate Thomas has served as Chair since 2020, and I am grateful that he wishes to continue his role for a final 4 years. The Income Support Medical Appeal Tribunal hears appeals on the award of impairment component under the income support system and any other decisions made on medical grounds. It may also hear appeals regarding care requirements for home carers allowance and the care assessments for long-term care. The tribunal comprises a chair or a deputy chair holding a qualification in law, a medical practitioner selected from a panel of up to 5 members, and a lay member selected from a panel of up to 5 members who are persons other than medical professionals and are experienced in dealing with the needs of people with disabilities. All members are appointed by the States Assembly. I am confident that Advocate Thomas has the skills necessary to uphold the fairness and integrity of the tribunal system. Sir, I am pleased to recommend this reappointment to the Assembly, and I make the proposition.
Thank you, Minister. Is the proposition seconded? Yes, sir. Honourable St Mary.
Thank you, sir. And I begin by assuring the Minister that I shall be supporting the proposition. And I thank, add my own thanks to the designated chairman for allowing his name to go forward. The only question I raise, which is one I've raised before, is that the Law Commission, in its report of 2018, did recommend, in the interest of efficiency, that some of these tribunals should be merged into one Jersey Administrative Appeals Tribunal, and I simply asked the Minister whether that has been considered, and in fact whether she considers that merging these 3 tribunals into one would effect any savings during these stretched times. Thank you.
Thank you, Natal. Does anyone else wish to speak on this proposition? Minister.
I thank the Constable for his comments. Indeed, when I saw these propositions come across my desk, I anticipated that we would get that question. I did say to my team that is something that we need to look at. I think we'll see through this process and the 3 propositions that we have an inefficiency of process there. So I think we should be looking to be as efficient as possible. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Those in favour of adopting the proposition kindly show.
Held, please, sir.
Held has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. The If all members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. And I can announce the proposition has been adopted unanimously, 46 votes for. The next item is Social Security Medical Appeal Tribunal, reappointment of chair, lodged by the same minister with the same respondent. I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The states are asked to decide whether they're of opinion to reappoint, in accordance with Article 34 of the Social Security Jersey Law 1974, further to a process overseen by the Jersey Appointments Commission, the following person as chair of the Social Security Medical Appeal Tribunal for the period stated against their name. Advocate Simon Thomas, 4 years.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to recommend that the Assembly reappoints Advocate Simon Thomas as the chair of the Social Security Medical Appeal Tribunal for a further 4 years. And I am grateful that he wishes to continue in this role for a final 4 years. The Social Security Medical Appeal Tribunal hears appeals regarding the award of long-term incapacity allowance following assessments regarding loss of faculty made by a medical board. The tribunal will review all facts placed before it and may confirm, reverse or vary the decision made by the medical board. The tribunal comprises of a chair or a deputy chair holding a qualification in law and 2 medical practitioners selected from a panel of up to 8 members. All members are appointed by the States Assembly. I am again confident that Advocate Thomas has the skills necessary to uphold the fairness and integrity of the tribunal system. I'm pleased to recommend this reappointment to the Assembly and I make the proposition.
Thank you, Minister. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? Those in favour of the proposition kindly show. The appellant has been called for. I invite members to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been adopted unanimously, 45 votes for. The next item is Social Security Tribunal, reappointment of chair, lodged by the same minister with the same respondent. I'll ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The states are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to reappoint, in accordance with Article 33A of the Social Security Jersey Law 1974, further to a process overseen by the Jersey Appointments Commission, the following person as chair of the Social Security Tribunal for the period stated against their name. Advocate Simon Thomas, 4 years.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I am pleased to recommend that the Assembly reappoints Advocate Simon Thomas as chair of the Social Security Tribunal for a further 4 years. And I am grateful that he wishes to continue in this role for a final 4 years. The Social Security Tribunal has been in place since 1974 and hears appeals on a range of benefits under the Social Security Jersey Law 1974, as well as aspects of other legislation administered by Employment, Social Security and Housing, such as the income support, long-term care and health insurance laws. This tribunal comprises a chair or a deputy chair holding a qualification in law and 2 lay members from a panel of 12 other members. All members are appointed by the States Assembly. I am again confident that Advocate Thomas has the necessary skills to uphold the fairness and integrity of the tribunal system, and I am pleased to recommend this reappointment to the Assembly. Sir, I make the proposition.
Thank you, Minister. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does anyone wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. I'm tempted to ask if the Minister could just repeat the name in case we hadn't caught it. But I was wondering, as a general kind of rule, how often do these tribunals sit, roughly. I'm just intrigued to know how much work does go into it from the chair and the members' perspective.
Anyone else speak on the proposition? Minister.
Sorry, so I'm just trying to find the relevant information so I can answer the deputy back. In the past years, there has been over these three tribunals. In 2025, there have been 7 hearings in total, 2 of which are due to be heard this month. In 2024, there were 3 hearings, and in 2023, there were 2 hearings. That's across the 3 tribunals. I won't separate that. And with that, I call for the appel, sir.
Thank you, Minister. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. And the proposition has been adopted unanimously. 46 votes in favour. That concludes public business for this meeting. I invite the Chair of PPC to propose the arrangement of public business for future meetings. Chair of PPC.
Thank you, sir. Looking ahead to the 25th of November, the arrangement of business is the same as the order paper except for the addition of P94, management and maintenance of the half-day par site,
yes,
which was deferred from today. And to mention on the 8th of December, we are starting on the Monday of that week. But just to mention to members that if it so happens that we are not making a great deal of progress, I advise ahead of time that on the Wednesday afternoon I will propose that we stay late on the Thursday. That is just to forewarn members in case any members have to make arrangements for the budget week. And just to mention as well, moving further forward to next year, obviously it's an election year, there will only be 6 meetings left, and the government legislation programme is quite weighty for the first couple of months, so I'd advise all members to leave continuations open. Thank you, sir. I propose the order of business.
Thank you. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to remind the Chair of the PPC that I have requested for the Registrar's Law to be debated with a shortened lodging notice next sitting as well, because it goes hand in hand with the Trademarks Law. Thank you.
Deputy Gorst.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to forewarn members that I'll email them later this week asking for P99 and P100, unfortunately, to be moved to the 8th of December sitting, notwithstanding what the Chair has just said. They are 2 international frameworks which need to come into effect on the 1st of January, and we were delayed in lodging them, for which I apologise. But I will email members anyway. I just wanted to let them know rather than having an email out of the blue. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Are members otherwise content to proceed as suggested by the Chair of PPC? Are members now content to adjourn? The Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 on the 25th of November.